You think, okay, I'd like to be in London in 40 minutes, that would be brilliant, but am I prepared for you to strap me into a Kinder Egg and shoot me there at 600 miles an hour? No. So...
And welcome to Season 2, Episode 19 of Bad Voltage. This is, as you've probably noticed from the timestamp, an extraordinarily long show. And with really only two things that we're going to talk about. So, Langridge, do you want to explain what the first one is?
Well, I'm not sure there's two things, right? We have the most bumper of bumper news segments, right?
Yes.
There's been
it is most bumper.
A great deal of news, and we're going to attempt to address at least some of it as it flies past the Bad Voltage headquarters window.
Yeah.
And then basically we're going to cover more news via Google. And since Jono is such a lover of the Pixel, we're going to cover everything that is Pixel news and more while doing so with machine learning, I assume.
Yeah. We're going to... Lots of machine learning. Lots and lots.
I, for one, welcome our new AI overlords.
On which note?
And now, Bad Voltage.
You know what? I'm feeling a little over newsy. Like there's almost too much news to get out onto the internet. We have to rustle up a lot of news.
It's not
our listeners'
an
delight.
Abundance of news.
It's the internet as a whole has created millions and millions of things to talk about in the space of 2 weeks. I don't quite know why this has been a particularly busy time, but it is.
But there's like an exponential curve of news.
No, there isn't. Right? You know how I'm not allowed to talk about sound engineering stuff? You're not allowed to talk about maths. You're not allowed to use words like exponential unless you know what they mean. There should be a background check before you're allowed to say things like that.
All right. Well, that's a fair deal. So, Langridge, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Apple have open sourced the kernels for iOS and macOS. Now, macOS was already open source, but the impression you have is that they'd kind of published it a few years ago and let it die on the vine. It's possible that I'm wrong about that, and Mac people can get back in touch, but they certainly hadn't published iOS kernels, and now they've done open source releases for all the kernels going back through different versions for both macOS and iOS, which I thought was, we keep saying open source your code, and they have done so.
Much as I applaud Apple for treading further and further into the open source world, obviously it was great to see what they've been doing with Swift as an example of that. Mm-hmm. This really isn't properly open source in my mind. Like, this is source code that's made available, right? It's putting code, as we've known in the open source community for years, dumping code onto the internet is definitely a contribution, but it's not a particularly useful contribution. So I think in terms of openness and transparency, Apple should be applauded. But, I think we should make sure that we hold the trumpets a little bit, that this is necessarily Apple kind of weighing in and participating into the open source community. This is just them putting shit on the internet, right?
Yeah, there's... it's not clear to me how useful this actually is on the grounds that it's not useful to you if you run iOS, right? It's not like you could take this kernel, make a tweak to it, put that kernel on your phone instead, right? I'm assuming if anyone who even comes within range of the Linux kernel looks sideways at this website, they get shot in the head.
Well, it is GPL-ish, right? So... It's GPL with...
No, it isn't.
Some of it is.
Really? I thought it was BSD. Goodness. But I
think the Apple public source license, which is GPL?
Yeah, APSL. Yes, that's what it is.
Ish thing.
There's a bunch of patent stuff, which we will get onto in a bit. But there's a credible argument that the goalposts get moved, right? We say what you should do is have open processes. People go, okay, we've got open processes. You go, no, you should open source all your code. You go, okay, we've open source all your code. No, what you have to do is build a community around it. Otherwise, it's not real open source. And they go, okay, if we build a community around it, what thing are you going to think up next that means that we're still doing it wrong? And I'm not particularly defending that. I agree with you, Jono. This is a code dump. But equally, given the fact that companies like this are not going to go full bore open source, right? is there anything they can do? Or are they always going to be at fault?
I would argue that the goal here is in an ideal scenario, we want to get to a point where companies are participating in common components that drive value to their companies, right? Apple are never going to open source Keynote, right? But it's conceivable that they'll open source pieces that are components of that. This is part of the reason how a lot of companies work together, right? They work in common pieces that are not particularly sexy in themselves, but then lots of people find it useful. Like the Linux kernel is shared and used by lots of different companies. My argument would be this is a good step in the right direction, but it's not particularly useful, right? Like, what is anyone going to do with this code? What's the point of it? What's the point of this?
That's my thing. I don't know what you can do. As I say, you can't recompile your iOS kernel for your iPhone with a couple of tweaks and then install it, as far as I'm aware.
Well, some of the ARM64 stuff stubbed out, not even there, right? And I don't think the new file system, I don't think is there. It's not a full open source dump.
There's a bunch of stuff which they go, well, this is all exciting. But then Google are the same with Android, right? AOSP comes out, but it turns out they've elevated half the operating system up into Play services. And some of that's for good reasons, because it means that they can avoid the whole your phone never gets upgraded thing. But equally, it means that all the cool new sexy stuff doesn't get open sourced.
So if Apple is not trying to build an ecosystem here, what do you think their motivations for the dump is? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know.
I would like to think that their motivation was they went, well, it doesn't cost us anything to do this. We might as well. We've been saying for ages, don't look for reasons to open source your code, look for reasons not to do so, right? The default should be, this code should be open source unless we've got a big reason for it not to be.
I don't think companies ever have the view, well, we've not really been doing this, we might as well.
No,
I just don't think that's how companies
companies
operate.
The size of Apple.
Darwin was open source before, right? So it's relatively costless to them to do this, and it means that we have discussions about this sort of thing and go, oh, well, that's not too bad a thing to do. You know, it's a small PR fillip for a small expenditure, so why not?
But it's not relatively costless for this to do, because I guarantee you that with each one of these code dumps, they've had a legal team poring over every element of it.
Yes.
I bet you it costs a fortune for them to dump this code onto the internet.
Yes.
That's what I don't understand is like they're making a statement that relates to open source, but they're not actually like, I can see this as a PR move because it's, you know, people are talking about Apple open source.
But there wasn't a lot of PR around it from there. They weren't driving a lot of the PR behind it, which makes me curious. I mean, I don't know if it's just a straight recruiting move because recruiting is getting more and more difficult. So maybe
wouldn't surprise me.
I mean,
maybe this is a step. Maybe this is step one.
They're stewards of a bunch of other open source projects as well, things like cups and so on and so forth, right? And so if you want people to continue to contribute to those, you can't be seen as an enemy of the whole open source ideal. So doing little bits like this keeps you just enough on side that everyone's not pissed off enough about it to bail. And people who don't care about this, don't care about this open source release, weren't annoyed by Apple anyway.
It wouldn't surprise me if they've basically built an internal open source programs office, and then in there someone said, let's just start by dumping some code on the internet. And
I thought you were going to say they built an internal open source programs office and then nailed the door shut. Next piece of news.
Next piece of news. I have one. Oh, no, Jeremy, go ahead.
All right, why don't we start with, have you guys seen this Evancoin release?
No.
I thought this was an interesting one. So Evan, who started WikiTravel, is the founder of WikiTravel, he did StatusNet, he did Identica, he did...
Evan Promodou or whatever, isn't it? Yeah.
So he's done quite a bit of stuff, and he's been interested in cryptocurrency recently. So he started a project that's a time-based currency basically for his time. So you can buy an Evancoin, and then at some point in the future, exchange it for 1 hour of his time. You can hold it, you can sell it, you can buy it and keep it. So it's based on Ethereum, and it's really interesting to read his blog as he iterates through the different ways he thinks he wants to do it and then finds problems. It's a little insight into how he thinks, which I think is interesting. But the concept of tokenizing your time into a time-based cryptocurrency, I think, is fascinating, although obviously not for everyone.
It's intriguing. I mean,
yes.
Is Is the main goal of this to sell his time, or is the main goal of this becomes a tradable thing in and of itself?
I think the main goal right now for him is just a learning exercise.
Yeah.
So, but it's like I said, if cryptocurrency at all interests you, definitely it's just evancoin.com/blog. Definitely read through his last few posts as he had a solution that he really liked, and then he thought about what if someone hoards them for a long time and then can't spend them? What impact would that have on the price? So watching him iterate through the thought process, I think, is one of the most interesting parts about the whole exercise.
It feels like, this is anchoring the value of the currency to something real, right? Rather than anchoring it to just conceptual stuff, which we stopped doing with the gold standard in the 30s. But I'm not economically literate enough to argue either side of that.
And I think it's also interesting to see how Ethereum's going to be used, right? Obviously, it's a lot different than Bitcoin, which is just a single cryptocurrency. How Ethereum and blockchains are evolving, I think, is also interesting.
The Ethereum people are spending all this time talking about, unrepudiatable contracts and all this sort of thing, right? And signing legal documents as part of the Ethereum blockchain and what have you. And I don't know whether, it feels very much like one of those sort of technical projects where you think, okay, we built the technology stuff, which was obviously the difficult bit, and now there's all this possibility, and actual people are going, no, what you've built is a technical substrate, and the people who take one possibility and turn it into a thing, that's the hard bit.
Right. I think, right? I've met Evan a few times before. He's a really cool guy, and it wouldn't surprise me if this is just, he's one of those people where he just kind of sits back and thinks, maybe I'll try this. It's kind of like how Matthew Garrett will just randomly decide to hack into some kind of device. Like, as an example, he came over here one time and I was barbecuing and I showed him this little temperature regulation thing that I've got. And he went out and bought one and just started poking into it just because he was curious. I think Evan's got the same kind of hacker mentality where he just likes to try things and see what happens. It's probably got no real actual purpose outside of his intellectual curiosity, which I applaud that.
Yeah, it is brave to sell a guaranteed hour of your time. Presumably, someone shows up and goes, I want an hour of your time, and he says no, then the currency crashes, right? I'm not really sure.
So that's actually in one of his posts is, what if someone buys it and asks me to do something illegal and I say no, what impact will that have on the price? So, he's put quite a bit of thought into it.
Comes the Evanmar Republic, where people have to push wheelbarrows full of Evancoin over to him to get him to do stuff.
All right.
I look forward to Jeremy Coin.
The first in the long line of Jeremy-related products. So
stay tuned for the next show on that one. On to you, Jono.
All right. So the little bit of news I've got here, I'm sure some of you have heard about this already, is that Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX, PayPal, and Tesla, and all these other things, has basically, his latest idea is essentially strapping human beings into an ICBM rocket and firing them across the Earth. Which the first time, when I first saw this hit the news, the first thing I thought was, he's now officially jumped the shark. This is fucking ridiculous. The Hyperloop, I think, is an interesting idea, and I get that. I think what he's done with Tesla is brilliant. What he's done with his solar work, and obviously what they did at PayPal, and SpaceX appears to be reaping great rewards from what he's been doing. But this strapping people into a rocket, it just seems like, Elon Musk has a random silly idea and it becomes news, and then startups suddenly start building it. And I wonder how many goes you get at that before you become kind of like the crazy futurist booster that nobody necessarily starts listening to anymore. You've got to make these things work. Anyone can come up with ideas, right?
No. See, there's the distinction. That's the difference between Musk and, say, Ray Kurzweil, right? Ray Kurzweil has a mad idea. His ideas are the maddest of mad ideas, to be clear. Yes. But he has a mad idea and then writes a paper about it. Elon Musk has a mad idea and then starts a little industry about it. Right? It's hard to point to any of his ideas so far and go, they have failed. You could make a very credible argument they are in the process of failing. Don't get me wrong.
I agree that, there's this ridiculous notion in the world. I get this with a lot of the clients who I work with, where, people want to talk about idea management and how you can help the best ideas float to the surface. And there is this ridiculous notion that all ideas are somehow good ideas. And so actually, there's a lot of really shit ideas in the world that we shouldn't pay attention to. But it strikes me that there is definitely, we should reward the implementation of the idea, right? Like, so if somebody has an idea,
there are no shit
about
ideas,
something,
just shit implementations.
right? But like I don't know. It seems
to me, leaving aside the stupidity of the idea, whether you think it's stupid or not, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a market for this, because we have successfully in the past built a way of getting from one city to another really, really fast. It was called Concorde. And nobody bloody flew on it because it was really expensive.
That's a little revisionist history, I believe. But the problem with Concorde is it couldn't take off or land anywhere. And if you can't take off or land anywhere, it turns out you can't do much.
No, I don't agree with you. That certainly didn't help. But basically, people looked at it and went, okay, it's cool to be able to go from London to New York in 2.5 hours. But am I prepared to pay 6 times as much money for it? And in general, the answer was no. You could probably make enough of a thing to keep it going, which is why it limped on for 30 years.
Right.
But it just didn't make enough money because people, especially in the world we're in now where the price, especially airline prices, these are driven down. Now, Musk has said he can make this happen for the price of ordinary airline flights, which I think is the most outrageous bullshit, and I would like to see some evidence of this.
Right.
I don't think it's possible to build this. I mean, I think Hyperloop is a buildable thing as well, and that would be cool to have.
Well, people are building it, right?
Yeah.
People are building test ones. I'm not seeing anyone go, we're going to build an actual real one from city to city and then run it with people in it. Also, right, half the problem they've got with the Hyperloop is exactly the same problem they got with this, and this is back to Jono's it's a stupid idea, right? You think, okay, I'd like to be in London in 40 minutes, that would be brilliant, but am I prepared for you to strap me into a Kinder Egg and shoot me there at 600 miles an hour? No. So, it's terrifying.
I think we're going to start seeing more and more of this out of Elon Musk. I think we're going to start seeing madder and madder ideas. And I think we're going to have a segment at some point in the future where we're going to spend 45 minutes assessing whether he's elegantly trolling everybody.
Do you not know about Neuralink?
Neuralink?
This is another Musk thing. He's got a company to do this, making a brain-computer interface. So the idea that we'll think things to one another.
Right. Okay. I go back to my point from about 4 or 5 minutes ago. I like Elon Musk. I think he's a smart dude, but I worry that his ego is now creeping into the level of I can do anything I want and it will happen.
I don't necessarily think it's his ego so much as the fact that his most random barstool utterings are now seen by a small but influential section of the populace as being technological Nostradamus.
Right.
He goes, I mean, we've all sat in the pub and gone, hey, wouldn't it be a cool idea to do this thing? Well, I invented YouTube years before YouTube happened, wrote it on a beer mat somewhere, just didn't turn it into a company.
Well,
Musk, I think, if he just sits in the pub and goes, hey, wouldn't it be great if you could, like, think thoughts to one another? Someone goes, oh, my God, Elon Musk creates brain-computer interface and then builds an industry around it.
To be fair, I did actually invent Twitter before Twitter happened. It was called K-Webster, and it was available to basically 3 people, but it was Twitter. It was just no one used it, but it was still Twitter. We better move on because we're 3 news stories in, and we've got a lot to go, and we're taking a while.
We do have a lot to go. So, since we're talking about blockchain currencies and cryptocurrencies and so on, the new wheeze is you serve web ads to people, but instead of showing them annoying, flashing, auto-starting videos, they mine Bitcoin on your computer and then send the Bitcoin back to the originator.
Here's the thing I didn't understand about this one, and to be fair, I did not read the entire article. I'm going to put that right out there. But given how difficult it is to now mine Bitcoin, right? You can't do it with a CPU. You can't even do it with a GPU anymore, really. Even at scale, you need ASICs and the whole dedicated hardware and stuff. So even at a massive scale, I don't see how this makes any money.
No. The reason, when you say you can't do it profitably.
Correct.
Right, because it costs you more in electricity than it is to run the miners. But you're not.
And that was inferred in the can't do it.
Yeah, but you're not paying for the electricity if you have the web ad to do it. You have.
But even at a massive scale here,
Well, I haven't sat down and worked through the numbers. I mean, I thought of this idea 6 months ago or so. I thought, hey, I've got a cool plan. Why don't I just write a little bit of JavaScript on my website which mines bitcoins, and then every time someone looks at my website, it'll mine 0.000000003 of a bitcoin or whatever, and then see how far it gets. And then I went looking for it and found loads of other people had already had the idea. But I thought it was all, hey, we've got this technically whizzy idea, isn't this amusing? And then it turned out loads of people are actually legitimately serving ads for this. What I want to talk about is what this does is, instead of playing annoying things or distracting your attention, it just pegs your CPU at 100% for a while. Is this a more, less, or equivalently legitimate thing as serving flashing video ads or ads that take over the screen or whatever? There seems to be a lot more outrage about this being much more terrible than other ads, and I think it's just about the same.
It's ludicrous for one main reason in my mind is if I go to cryogenics.org to go and discover this fine collection of web development and consulting services, and basically as I'm browsing that website, my computer drags down to a complete halt, I will never go back to that website again. So like, even if this thing works, people will get so pissed off with the performance impact, I think, that they won't go.
Do you not go back to websites which show you millions and millions of ads?
I don't care about ads. I go to tons of websites where there are loads of ads. I watch ads on YouTube videos. I'm not paying for the YouTube ad-free thing.
But you can imagine tweaking it so it uses 60% of your CPU, right? And one thing can't hang your whole computer. It's a lot harder for a thing to hang your whole computer now. Yeah, so it will have a deleterious effect on your experience, but no more so than popping up an unclosable sign up to our Facebook newsletter thing, which you have to clear away first.
I don't know. I don't care about ads. I care about performance.
So as of May, it would take 2.7 million years for the average CPU to generate 1 Bitcoin. So even aggregated to a ton of ads, I still don't see how...
I have assumed that the people doing this are doing it because the numbers work out for them somehow. I have not worked it out. So spot me for the sake of this discussion that the numbers work out. I agree with you. If they're just exercising people's CPUs and it annoys them and it doesn't actually make any money, then yes, it's pointless. Yeah. Right? So spot me for the sake of the discussion that it works out. I mean, even if it doesn't mine Bitcoin, maybe you mine Ethereum or Evancoin or something, right?
Right.
So your actual question is, if it is profitable, what are your thoughts on pegging someone's CPU instead of showing them an ad? Because that's the actual trade-off.
Yeah.
Ads don't bother me, so...
I don't think having my CPU run at 60% rather than 10% would bother me either. Well, I mean, in theory it bothers me because of my electric bill, but whatever, seriously. My electric bill goes up by tuppence.
Yeah, I mean, if every site did that and your CPU is constantly pegged, your experience overall is going to be suboptimal.
Well, yeah, but that's exactly the same thing as going to read a 400-word newspaper article which downloads 68 megabytes of ads on your capped data connection. Right? What's the difference?
The cost doesn't
I wrote
bother
in the
me.
show notes Stuart's controversial defence of why it's not as bad as everyone seems to think it is. It still is controversial, I say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I mean, the cost element, the electricity cost or the bandwidth issue doesn't bother me at all because I have unlimited internet on my at home and on my mobile device.
Yeah. But
the idea of if I'm in the middle of working on something and I go and take a quick look at a website and everything starts slowing down, that will have a aggregate impact on my time, and that's more valuable to me than like. If there's ads on a web page, I just ignore the ads. Or to be honest with you, ads actually have become useful for me as well. There's actually increasingly more and more ads that are actually things that I care about now.
So the thing that bothers you is that it would massively affect your experience. Imagine, for example, that it were still profitable if we just run your CPU up a little bit. So you didn't really notice it? The concept of this doesn't bother you, only if I start making your machine hard to use.
No, exactly.
Some people seem to be, some of the responses to it seem to be very much more that it's conceptually worse than showing someone a video to do this.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
No,
I mean, the way Flash ads were for the longest time, they pegged your CPU at 100% anyway, so it's...
Yeah.
Yeah. The concept for me is actually quite clever. I think it's quite smart.
That was what I thought. There's just outraging. I mean, to be honest with you, an ad blocker will block these just as much as it blocks everything else, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I thought it was
so if you want to kill the internet, use your ad blocker.
I was going to say, we've seen an interesting time where no one wants to see ads and no one wants to pay for real journalism, but everyone wants real journalism to just out of the ether be there.
Right. That's why I think
I don't
have the answer to it, but
that's why I think and I'm going to be blunt here, that's why I think if you're using an ad block, you're a bad person, because you're killing the internet slowly. The internet's got to make money somehow.
I would argue had the advertising industry not been so shady, ad blockers wouldn't be a thing, but this sounds like an entire segment in and of itself.
That sounds like a great segment for a future show.
I should do a write-up about this, so I shall go back and read it and then remember it for the next segment.
All right,
although on the privacy ad and Bitcoin kind of mining Bitcoin with ads notes, I remain of the minority opinion here that the unexpected paradox of cryptocurrency, especially if it ends up being Bitcoin, is that it will probably be the greatest threat to privacy since the cell phone.
Cryptocurrencies will be?
You can't just drop that on the table and walk off. You've got to unpack that a little bit.
Well, right. Yeah. The thing about Bitcoin is it's fully trackable and the history never goes away. And if a very small percentage of people don't practice good privacy hygiene, which trends towards 100% certainty, you'll be able to unpack the entire history, meaning no one has any privacy of what they spent ever.
Because if someone records if I record that I dealt with you and I'm rubbish at privacy, it doesn't matter how good you are,
correct,
because you can still see both halves of that transaction.
And once a small percentage of people are rubbish, and a small percent of people will always be rubbish at privacy, the whole thing comes undone, I think. So I think the irony of people wanting cryptocurrency for privacy is going to be lull.
You know,
that's actually a really interesting view the difference in tools between tools which allow you to be unilaterally private, even if everyone else doesn't care, you could still be fine just by doing things yourself, and ones which require the whole community to buy into it, and as soon as someone doesn't, it compromises everybody.
So if there's a different cryptocurrency like Zcoin that values anonymity, that wouldn't be the case, but if it's one like Bitcoin, it's going to be interesting to watch unfold.
I'm making extra notes for the talk I'm doing at Hackference, which is about privacy. That's actually a really good point, and one I hadn't thought of. I need to write it down.
We should talk about that in a future show, and maybe get on someone like Brian Behlendorf, who's working on like the Hyperledger project, and get someone who's working in this to get their input, because he'd be I mean, he's a smart dude anyway, but it'd be fascinating to hear, because I've never thought about that. That's a really interesting point, Jeremy. All right, I'm going to come up with one more, and then, this is going long. Yeah. All right, so the U.S. Senate panel has approved self-driving car legislation. On Wednesday, the U.S. Senate Commerce Committee unanimously approved a bill to speed self-driving cars to market without human controls, and to bar states from imposing regulatory roadblocks. The bill still must be approved by the full Senate. The U.S. House passed a similar version last month unanimously. General Motors, Alphabet Inc., Ford Motor Company, and others have lobbied for the landmark legislation. Now, apparently some Republicans have moaned about this, but the Senate bill does not speed approval of self-driving technology for large commercial trucks, because some labor unions apparently raised safety and employment concerns about this. So an interesting step in the right direction, I would argue.
Okay.
I mean, we want self-driving cars ultimately, I think.
I'm not sure I want self-driving cars enough that I'm prepared to go, hey, anyone saying, why don't we be careful with self-driving cars, is some kind of sclerotic obstruction to progress and they should be swept aside immediately.
I agree. Totally agree with you. It has to be done right.
But the Senate don't agree with you, though. They've just states who object to this, not allowed to object anymore, get stuffed. These are now happening and there's nothing you can do about it.
I think in these kinds of situations, everything's going to basically level out. I think the pendulum swings too far in one direction, then it swings too far in the other direction, backwards and forwards. Ultimately, you'll get something that generally pans out as being okay.
I don't know what about the last 20 years has given you that insight, but
Well, this gets back to the long-running trend that I'm an optimist and you two are more pessimists. So that's what makes bad voltage work.
Yes.
Well, the fact that you live in Narnia and we live here. Yeah.
I think it is interesting because the Senate has not been pro-technology, generally speaking, historically. So the fact that they are on this one, it is interesting in and of itself, I think.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, maybe this is a shift. There'll be pro lots of other technologies and not just ones with really big lobby groups. We should find out.
I don't think so. Speaking of which, Reddit just hired lobbyists.
I saw that.
Reddit?
Yeah, they hired their first lobbyist.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, for more lolcats in government.
Presumably we could just go to r/Senate to find out what's going on now, right?
Right.
So I'll run through a couple of mine quickly, and then
go through them quickly, and then we'll get onto Google.
So do you see the Equifax CEO step down? Unsurprising after that massive breach. What was not?
Well, he got screwed. Yeah, he got screwed by one member of his own team, right?
One guy he blamed it on. Wherever you are, Steve, I presume your name is. Terrible job. But the thing that I found fascinating, and just a little insight into the current CEO situation in the United States, is he may step away with $90 million.
Yeah.
If the Equifax stock doesn't do terribly and they don't try to claw anything back, he will walk away with nearly $100 million in compensation
that seems fine,
as a result of this. That's
not only have 150 million people had their details leaked, but they've had to pay 60 pence for the privilege of doing so. Excellent.
Nice. Another one. Did you guys see Bill Gates switch to Android publicly?
Yes.
So I thought that was
really
that's an interesting admission of defeat for Windows Phone or Windows Mobile or Windows CE or whatever they're calling it now.
I think they'd already kind of admitted defeat on that one.
Yeah,
I just thought it was.
This is not bad.
I thought it was interesting that he publicly. Does that mean Android is one now?
The native took switches to Android. Maybe it's one.
No, I mean, they're sailfish.
And the other one I thought was interesting, and this kind of dovetails with the ads thing, is Google has officially axed the first click free program for publishers. So I'm interested.
What was that?
What was that? I don't know what that is.
Oh, they had a program before where you basically publishers' news sites that had a paywall, if they wanted to be included in Google search at all, had to show the first click free, and then if they clicked anywhere else on the site from that, you could show the paywall. So basically, if you came from a Google search to like Washington Post, they had to show the article, even if there's no paywall.
Oh, really?
And they did it for roughly a decade, I think. So it was going on for a very long time. Now they're doing something called flexible sampling, which allows publishers to decide how many, and that number can be 0 now, articles they want to allow subscribers free access. And they gave them a little more tooling around how to handle it and things like that. But I'm curious how publishing moves forward now that paywalls seem to be working for some people, don't seem to be working for other publications at all. And in a world where I want real journalism, it's definitely a topic I'm following pretty closely.
Yeah, it's not very clear at all how that's going to work out, to be honest with you.
All right, anything else?
Well, one very big thing is we're talking about Microsoft and going to switch to Android. Has Android won? Microsoft are also releasing the Edge browser for iOS and Android.
Does anyone care?
My thing is I'm not sure what the point of it is, because it's like other browsers on the platform. It's not actually their browser. It's just their browser shell around the widget the platform gives you. So it's still iOS Safari in the same way that Chrome on iOS is iOS Safari, right? It just gives you a different box that it comes in. But I don't know who wants the stuff that Edge provides. Now, this is relatively new news in that they announced it about 3 hours before we're recording this. So it's not clear exactly how it's going to shake out yet. But I'd be interested to hear from people who like features that Edge gives them that other browsers do not give them, other than the way it does rendering.
Right.
You know, I mean, some people like Chrome on iOS, for example, because you can sync your passwords with Chrome on your Android device or on your desktop or whatever, right? And maybe that's the thing. People who've got Windows laptops want to share passwords, and Microsoft don't want them to go, okay, in order to do that, we've got to install Chrome then. Or Firefox.
What does Micro? I mean, I don't know if either of you guys know this, but what does Edge do that is new and interesting compared to the other browsers? Like, what's unique about it? Putting the rendering to one side, I mean, just features wise, like, does it?
Well, features wise,
pages in it.
Because I'm but then if I say to you, which browser do you use? And I say, you pick one, and then I say, well, why don't you use Firefox or what? You've got a reason, right? There are reasons choosing between browsers. They're not literally just boxes with a rendering engine in.
I think the main reason for everyone that isn't a web developer like you is inertia.
Yeah. I use Chrome, and the main reason why I use it is because it's faster than Firefox. I don't use any of the
right, and that's the thing. The Edge people have done quite a lot of work on performance stuff, and they're pushing for a bunch of modern web standard things. A lot of this is catch up, right? It's stuff that Chrome and Firefox have done for ages, and now Windows finally gets to catch up. But they are actually starting to forge ahead in some of it, which, you know how Chrome was first with WebRTC or whatever? Now the Edge people are looking to be first for a bunch of things. They're looking at VR stuff, for example, and some of the WebGL things and so on. So this is not a thing which is useful in itself to you, but it's useful so people can build things that you will like on top of it, you know?
It must be hard to be a browser maker because I think the vast majority of people... Like, to me, it seems like the last major innovation in web browsing for most users was tabbed browsing, which was years ago. Beyond that, I think people are quite happy with just like, okay, I don't even think a lot of people necessarily use favorites anymore. I think they just, bookmarks, like that used to be a big deal back in the earlier days of the web, but now you just type stuff into the address bar and it automatically searches it on Google and you typically find it, right? So it must be hard for a browser maker because it's kind of a solved problem in many ways. Like, again, from a web development perspective, it's radically different. But.
There's a bunch of stuff which you currently don't do in the browser and maybe could do or should do. But equally, there's a bunch of stuff which you used to not do in the browser and now you do. You know, read your email, you probably just use a Gmail tab, right?
You know, one thing which I want while we're talking about this, that I would love to see in a browser, and maybe this exists and I just don't know about it. But like when I'm working, I'm sure you guys are the same. Like when I'm working, I psychologically group different things together, right? So there's a bunch of tabs open in my browser that are personal, things like Facebook and Twitter and whatever else. And then if I'm working with a client, there may be 5 or 6 tabs which are all Google Docs that I'm working with them around, and then maybe a to-do list associated with that. What I want to be able to essentially have is a web browser for each project. So I can
Firefox containers.
Yeah, Firefox tab containers does this. I have different Chrome windows, each of which have got a bunch of tabs in for different projects. So I've got one
That's
for
what I do.
A project which will remain nameless, one for another project, one for my personal browsing, so on. That's in Chrome. But Firefox actually has tab containers where you can give them names and stuff like that. So yeah, this already exists, man.
Just the problem with that though is that at least on a Mac, alt-tabbing between those different windows doesn't really work very well. I guess you can put them on different desktops, but...
Also, for Firefox containers, you can have, in the same window, you can have tabs with completely different permissions in the same browser window. That's the point of containers. So you could have a cryogenics container and an ACK container that share no information. So you could be logged into different Gmail accounts and everything, but in one browser window.
Because essentially what I want is a tab that groups tabs. Is that what?
Yeah. So there's also the tab tree thing too, but that's an web extension.
Yeah, but Firefox is better at this sort of stuff than Chrome is. Chrome, in order to do that, you basically spin up separate profiles. Now, profiles are cheap. They're easy to set up. If you look at the top right-hand corner of your Chrome window, it's got a little picture, and you can just create other profiles, and then each one of those is independent and separate. But what you can't do is put multiple profile tabs in one window.
And a profile is attached to a Google account, right?
It doesn't have to be. They want you to, and if you don't attach to a Google account, every time you open a new window, it will go, hey, why not sign into Google in that window? But you don't have to sign into Google.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I've learned something new today.
Firefox, as with many things, is better at this.
I should try Firefox. I haven't tried it for a while, so.
Hence the suggestion.
All right. Do you use Firefox?
I'm mostly Chrome, but I dot around a lot.
I'm like the last person to use Firefox as my main browser, I think. And I'm probably going to switch. They keep claiming the next version is the version that decreases memory usage greatly, and then I download the next version and it doesn't.
Have you tried Quantum?
No.
The latest thing. That's supposed to be a radical reinterpretation of the text. I'll believe it when I see it.
What I hear, yeah.
Yeah. Right. When I get a snap version, so I can install it just with one click and not have it sod up my normal Firefox, then I'll be happy to try it out. So Google had an event where they released a bunch of stuff. And
yes.
So we now go live to our Google correspondent, who has presumably bought all of it already, Jonathan Bacon, who was standing there at the front of the stage, whacking the guy on his head with his credit card, going, I just want this, I don't even care what it is, just put a Google logo on it and I'll buy it because I'm that much of a moron. Do tell us, Jono, your thoughts on all of these things.
I have not bought any of these things, actually, but I am going to. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through, there was a lot covered in this October 4th event. I think a lot of people were primarily expecting it to be just about the Pixel 2, but they actually announced a bunch of other shit as well. So we're going to go through this one by one, cover it briefly, and then we'll kind of share our thoughts on it. So why don't we start out with the Google Home Mini and Max? So for those of you who have been, which sounds like an awful TV show, by the way. For
those of you who are actually already in this world, the Amazon Echo Dot Google edition.
Right.
It's an Echo Dot.
So if you've been now with more cloth.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a furry Echo Dot, and the Max is just an Amazon Echo.
Well, no, the Max actually is a pretty nice speaker.
It's interesting. I think I'm being slightly unfair to the Max. The Echo speaker is better than the Google Home.
But hang on. Let me explain what it is first for people who haven't seen it. So
it's an Echo Dot. That's literally the explanation.
Google Home, obviously, Google Home was the Google smart speaker with Google Assistant built into it, and they basically they're going to be releasing the Google Home Mini, which is a much smaller version to axe points, basically like a Google Dot. It's going to be $50. And then they're also releasing something called the Google Home Max, which is a much bigger speaker, and it's primarily designed for much better audio production.
Yeah.
Apparently, the Google Home Mini basically looks like a Google Home that someone stood on. It's got this cloth. Apparently they not only, as part of the product development phase, as they were developing this cloth that goes on the top, not only did they go through an unbelievable level of research to find the right color, but they also designed the next erotic thriller, because they went through 150 shades of grey to find the type of cloth.
Also, I swear to God, right, the Google Home Mini, if I put that on the side in my flat, the first thing that would happen is my mum would come in and put a cup of tea on it.
Now, I'm a Google Home user. I think Jeremy's got one. Well, Jeremy's got one.
It's rubbish.
But I don't know how much Jeremy uses his. But I love my Google Home, and we're moving house, and we're going to be. This timing was good for us.
Does that mean you have to get a new one because it's not your home anymore?
Well, we're gonna basically put a ton of Google Homes across the house, and one of the things I like about the Max is the Google Home audio is actually pretty good, right? So, in fact, Langridge was over. My wife organized a surprise birthday party, and Langridge was over. And I just put the Google Home outside to play music on. And outside, it actually sounded quite good, I thought.
Yeah, now
it's a little speaker.
I've only got Echo Dots, not proper Echoes. And the Echo Dot, I mean, it's got a speaker, and you can listen to music on it, but it's like leaving your phone on the side, right? It's kind of tinny and not very good. The actual Echo is good. I would say the actual Echo is better than the Google Home, but the Max, the new thing, is going to be better still because it's basically a really good speaker.
Right.
It's closer to the Sonos 5 for those familiar with that.
Yeah.
Right.
You could buy a Max and put it in the living room, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm probably going to mainly put the Max. I'm probably going to mainly put it in the kitchen, because in the living room, I'll probably just have the TV speakers. I'll probably have Chromecast for... I'm going to buy a TV with Android TV built into it, which will have Assistant built in.
Don't do it, man.
Jeez.
So,
don't buy a smart TV. Buy a stupid TV and then plug a device of your choice into it.
you can't buy a TV that isn't smart. I might as well buy a TV that I want, that's got the smart bit in it that I want, and then when that thing becomes outdated or useless, I'll just buy the thing that you plug in the side. You can't buy a dumb TV anymore.
Can you really not?
At least
Wow.
a decent TV. Yeah. Like, my current TV is dumb. It's, like, really dumb. So we'll see. The thing that's interesting to me is the Google Home Mini, $50, seems like a pretty decent deal. The Max seems a bit overpriced to me. It's $400.
Yeah.
So
good speakers are expensive.
They are.
That's true.
That's the thing. I mean, I'm Amazon person rather than Google, but the Echo is twice the price of the Dot, over twice the price, and basically all you get for it is a better speaker. And it's hard to look at it and go, yes, I want that. But maybe if you play a lot of music, it'd be good. The Max is going to be actually, instead of being a reasonable speaker on the side, it will be the centerpiece of your home entertainment system kind of thing. But it's still pretty bloody expensive.
Well, I thought that was the whole point of the Dot, is it plugs into your current existing system. That's why the speaker
you could just
rubbish.
you could just buy a Dot and then a good speaker of your choice and plug it in.
Or presumably, if you care about music, you already have a good speaker setup.
Yeah,
Right.
no, true enough, yes.
And the Google people haven't necessarily said that you'd use the Max as your main audio for your TV or something like that. Apparently, I read somewhere that it sounds like they're going to do that because a bunch of developers kind of looked at each other knowingly when they were asked about it.
Yeah.
The one thing that is interesting about the Max, which I'm assuming they'll bring to the other speakers, is that apparently what it does is it changes the dynamics of the audio depending on where the speaker is. So if you have the speaker on some shelves in a room, on one side of a room against the wall, if you put a normal speaker there, it doesn't change the dynamics of the audio based upon the fact that, like, where the speaker is situated. And then if you move the speaker to another part of the room, the Max will actually adjust those dynamics. And some journalists, I saw a journalist who thought this was going to be shit and basically tried it out. Apparently, it's pretty impressive.
Really?
And
that sounds like a bunch of audiophile toss to me.
I mean,
That's right up there with buying gold cables and stuff, in my opinion.
It isn't, though, because AV systems for a long time, like main AV heads, they come with a little microphone that you put in the room, and then basically it plays the test signal in each of the speakers, and then it adjusts the level of the test signal based upon what it gets back through the microphone. So it's not particularly new technology, but I think it's cool that they're going to start doing
I may have dismissed that early just on the grounds that everything like that just sounds like a way of stealing another $600 off moronic audiophile people.
Now, Langridge, what's the rule about having opinions about audio?
Fair comment, yes, okay, I'll give you that one.
All right, shall we move on?
Yeah. So, well. First of all, before we go on to that, you're definitely now wedded to the Google ecosystem, right? You've decided to go full bore Google rather than embrace the proper world of Amazon, right?
Mainly because Google know everything about the planet, so they're a much better services company. So that's why assistants are only useful in telling me about shit either that is associated with me or in the rest of the world. Google has all of that information about me and the rest of the world. So I believe it will be a better overall solution.
Jeremy, you've been ambidextrous, or I'm not sure how you describe it.
Ambidextrous. I am not one to buy into an ecosystem to that level, typically.
So you've got both Dots you've got both Echoes and Google Home, right?
I have a Google Home because I was given one, yes, and I have a Dot.
Would you see yourself buying any of it? I mean, obviously, Jono's going to buy all of this. Do you see yourself buying any of these?
Mini or Max? No, definitely.
Yeah. No, okay. Jono, you're going to put a home in every room of your house, right?
Not every room, but a lot of them.
Cool. And I'm obviously not buying any because I'm an Amazon person, but that's fine. If Amazon came out with all this stuff, probably buy some of it. So the concept is not wrong.
It's the modern day Sega and Nintendo.
It really is.
Kind of it.
I tell you what, and for the first time in a long time, I'm finding myself investing in an ecosystem, investing emotionally, mentally in an ecosystem that might win, rather than the last 20 years of having all my emotions tied up with a technology platform which 1% of people used and no real people cared about. I'm on the right side here. This is great.
That's because you sold out quicker than the Pixel, not necessarily the Pixel 2.
Very good.
You see that segue right there?
That was very slick. We can't talk about the Pixel because there's a bunch of miscellaneous crap in the middle we got to talk about first.
Do you want to talk about the other shit first?
I'd like to talk about the world's stupidest camera.
Okay. The Google Clip.
The Google Clips.
So this is basically
it's called the Google Clips, plural. Just to annoy people. That was the first thing that annoyed me about it. It's got a plural name for no reason, even when there's only one.
I don't think that's true. I think it has a plural name because the hardware is not named after the hardware, because I think the hardware doesn't matter in this case. The product is named after the software, which is called Clips, because it gets clips of your life. And I think the only thing Google cares about in this case is the software. I think this product is only to feed more data to the machine learning algorithm.
So again, to explain what this is basically a little camera. It just kind of looks like a webcam. The idea is that you basically dot these things around, and then software
in the advert,
always...
just to interrupt slightly, in the advert, for this thing, when they did the introduction, someone took one of these and clipped it on the side of a bag of flour.
And then a baby walker.
Not on the wall or on top of a monitor or on the fence opposite where you're taking the photos. Clipped it to a bag of flour in the kitchen.
So the idea of this thing is you basically dot these cameras around, and then the AI is the software is basically observing these cameras, and based upon, from what I could tell from this Google announcement, every 2 seconds they said the words machine learning.
Yes.
So the machine learning here will basically then take a snap of something when the moment happens, as opposed to depending on you being there with the camera and getting the camera app open and pressing the button at the right time. I think conceivably it's actually a really kind of interesting idea. It's creepy is the thing for me.
We have talked in the past about the attempting to find the dividing line between this is really useful and this is basically loading a microphone into your house willingly and a camera into your house willingly. We talked about drop cams and we've talked about assistants and so on and so forth. But the explicit goal of these things is to put them everywhere so that they film everything from every angle, and then the machine learning, in air quotes, will pick the things that you want. And for this privilege, Google expects you to pay $249 per camera.
That's stupidly expensive.
I mean, you said it looks like a webcam. It doesn't look like a webcam. It is a frigging webcam. That's what it is.
It's a high-quality camera, so I don't think $250 is all that aggressively priced for what it is. Maybe I'm wrong there.
You
can buy like a 4K webcam for like $35.
This is my point.
Right, but the thing is, this isn't just a camera. Maybe you guys missed this part of the announcement.
It's a camera connected to the internet.
No, none of the machine learning takes place in the cloud, precisely because it is creepy. It all takes place on the camera. So the camera actually has a fair amount of internals on it. Now, I will grant you, they said machine learning roughly 1,000 times in a 15-minute film, which was kind of impressive, actually. But, I mean, I think the thing here is there's pretty good research and studies released that taking a picture of a moment substantially impacts your memory of that moment. You remember taking a picture. You do not remember the moment. So this conceptually absolutely fascinates me.
Yeah, but it's a brilliant idea.
This product as a hardware segment, I don't think Google thinks will succeed, wants to succeed at all. I think this is the first iteration of this being in every Google product. Because if there's a camera everywhere and it knows... So from what I could gather, it looks for people looking at the camera, people smiling. It's very specific events that they've fed it, that it should then snap a photo during that time. Or take a clip, which is like an animated
How miserable is your life that smiling is a specific event that should have a picture taken of it?
It's a moment you may want to remember, is what it is.
Yeah. This is one of those things, unfortunately, where I think that if their machine learning was as credible as they want us to believe it is, in that it always takes pictures of the bits you wanted to and never takes pictures of anything else, and it does all that by learning on the camera, then people will go, yeah, that's great. But there's literally no way you can trust either that that's the case and they're not lying about it, or that it'll be anything like successful, especially in iteration 1.
I have to say,
I think this device is feeding enough data into the algorithm to make it reasonable for when they release it on a phone or other product that has higher adoption.
So this is basically a way of convincing people with more money than sense to trial out a beta version of their thing.
I wouldn't word it exactly like that, but sure.
The one thing I would say, though...
Jeremy's smiling, take a picture of him.
Right. The one thing that is interesting, though, is when I got the Pixel, and, you've got Google Assistant built into Google Photos, right? So... I take a lot of photos with my phone, and one of the things I love about it is, reasonably regularly, I'll just kind of go through and it's really fun kind of taking a trip down memory lane. One of the things that's really nice about the Assistant for Photos is that it will often basically put together like a little video of like for example, I took Jack to the zoo last weekend, or the weekend before, I think it was, and it made like a little video of pictures, and and it also included things such as like it had like an overlay of like where we were, and it was just it basically, my phone created content without me having to do it, in the same way that it will randomly basically generate an animated GIF that perfectly loops of Jack dancing or something else.
It's almost like the machine learning is learning what you like.
And it's like, but there is something about I think it's exciting, the notion of your devices generating material without you asking for it. The tricky thing is, for example, if we had one of these things in our living room, right? Like I spend a lot of time, my family spends a lot of time in the living room hanging out, watching TV, or Jack will be dancing, or we'll be playing games. There's a lot of smiling happens in there. I'm curious how it picks out unique moments as opposed to just moments that match the algorithm. And if they get that right, it will be phenomenal. But I think
that's exactly my point. I mean, you take that the thing where it automatically creates a little video of stuff you've done, and I can see in theory that's a good idea, but in practice, it asks me that quite a bit, and I never want any of them. And it doesn't seem to be learning.
It's created some cool ones for me over the years, I think.
Yeah, it rarely creates them for me, and pretty much every time I find it cool.
I may just not be the target market for this, And
is this Google? You're using Google Photos with Assistant on this?
I'm not. It does it in Google Photos. You don't need it on the phone.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with Assistant, because I disable Assistant.
Oh, really?
That's just Google Photos.
That's just Google Photos does that,
which is slowly turning into one of their best products.
It is.
Yeah.
Things like the recognition of food and objects and the facial recognition stuff, it's pretty... It makes like finding previous photos really easy when you've taken thousands of fucking photos.
The fact that you can say, show me every picture of Stuart Langridge I've ever taken with my phone in Munich, and it gets it right nearly 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It would be nice if it could machinely learn to stop saying to me, hey, you're running out of space on your phone. How would you like me to steal a bunch of your photos and only store them on our servers? And have me go, no, I don't want that, 9,000 times.
I've never had that happen.
Never had that happen once.
But that's because you've got 128 gigabytes of storage on your phone and I haven't. Mister, no one ever runs out of storage on their phones, Bacon. We had this fight on the forum,
with a stick over that one, I will admit. So we should move on. And I'd like to talk about my friend Dave, who has a Google Pixel, and I have a Google Pixel. We are therefore Google Pixel buds.
No.
Delivering the segue.
That was a stretch, seriously.
No. So, Pixel buds, which is
I think puds is better.
Puds.
Nice little portmanteau for you.
Puds are basically it's essentially a cord with two earpieces on the side. They kind of look a little bit like.
Before you go on, I'd just like to announce to the audience now that I'm gearing up to give you a bollocking when you are wrong about the feature. Carry on.
Okay.
Okay.
Spoiler alert there.
I was going to say.
So the puds, they almost look a little bit like, kind of like exercise headphones, where you have like the thing and then it clips on the back of your head, but they're like a loose strap as opposed to the thing that straps to the back of your head.
And they've got a strap, a wire joining them, so you can't lose one and not the other.
Right. So they're not like the AirPod things, where they're individual things that stick in your ear. They've got a button on the side which you can use for like triggering. Google Assistant is built into it, and you can use it for like adjusting volume and track controls and things like that. They're pretty expensive. They're $160, right? Yeah. And I generally personally stay away from in-ear headphones because no matter how good people say they are, I just don't think they're very good. I always go for over-ear headphones. The demo that they gave of this, which I thought was interesting, which I'm presuming is related to the booting,
here it comes,
is when they had like someone involved in the development of this basically stood on stage, and one person was speaking in Swedish, and then it would automatically translate it into English, and then the other person could speak back, and then that person would have it translated into Swedish, which I thought was pretty cool.
If it was anything like the truth, yes.
Well, the one final thing I want to say is is these things charge in the box as well, and the box itself can hold multiple charges. So it means that you can base each charge lasts. I forget how long they said it was, like
only 5 hours,
3 hour, 4 hours,
which is
5 hours.
I don't know why you would release a headphone that works for 5 hours if it can't make it through a flight across the country. Rubbish.
But I agree with I agree with you.
Yeah, my headphones have no battery in at all and are fine.
Yeah, but as we'll get onto the Google Pixel, well, that's all going away. So, all right, so go on then, Langridge. What's your issue with the
translation thing? It's honestly, it's not so much the actual demonstration they did; it's that everyone has assumed it does way more than it actually does.
It just opens Google Translate on your phone.
Million posts on Twitter going, wow, this is like the Babelfish from Hitchhiker's Guide, where you just stick it in your ear and then you can just understand things as people speak them. No. You turn it on and then you give the other person your phone and they speak into it and then you hear a translation, which is clever. What it's not is, I just put them on and then wander around in France and I can understand what everyone's saying. Which is what the
headphone has a mic, right? I think it has nothing to do with your phone. Your phone can be in your pocket and it still works.
As I understand it, it's not. You can't just stick them in and then hear conversation. I might be wrong.
Because I saw an interview with the guy that was the product manager, and people asked, "Why are you tethering this feature to only the Pixel earbuds and not regular earbuds?" And he said, because there's no stand. What they wanted was a touch and hold functionality. So you touch it, you hold it, you talk, and then it translates that. The average headphone doesn't have an equivalent functionality from a button perspective.
But that's you saying things and it translating them out. I'm talking about listening, which is much more useful, right?
But it's the same UI. I think it's the mic in the headphone, not the mic on your phone.
As I understand it, and again, I may be wrong, but that's not the case.
The person's phone wasn't out on stage during the demo.
You need to give some... but they're all wired for sound, right? As I understand it, if you want to go and use this on some random street in Kathmandu, you have to hand the person your phone and they speak into it, and then you hear the translation.
At that point, why wouldn't you just use Google Translate? So to be clear, this feature has absolutely nothing to do with the headphones whatsoever. It's just running Google Translate on your phone. So this exact thing has existed, just not in headphone form.
Yeah, but and this is the point. I mean, I would like to be wrong about it. It's my understanding. I've not seen them demonstrate in a live fire environment, right? Neither has anyone else. They've been out 5 minutes. So it'll be interesting to see how this actually works. Well, yeah, okay, so yes. When I say they've been out 5 minutes, they've been announced for 5 minutes.
They ship in November. I mean,
presumably Marcus Brownlow's got a set.
I'm presuming
but I'll be interested to see how this works. But as far as I can tell, they're being way oversold for what they actually do, unless I'm completely wrong about it, which I
think you're reading too much into the demo. I think they gave an interesting demo and they showcased it, and I don't think anyone's expecting you to be able to walk around and it will just translate stuff on the fly.
I disagree with you entirely that that's what people are expecting. People might not be supposed to be expecting that, but they very much certainly are.
Right, but some people think that there is a child sex colony on the moon or on Mars, and you're like, that's not true, is it? So it's like
nobody thinks that.
Some people think that.
Next,
and those people are crazy.
Well, no, more seriously, I mean, do you get a free pair of puds if you buy a Pixel 2?
No,
I doubt it.
No, you get a free Google Mini or Home Mini or whatever it is.
Well, okay.
Oh, is that the sweetener they've got in it? Because I know when I bought my Pixel, you got the Daydream View was the freebie that they threw in.
Yeah, it's the first. If you order it before a certain date, you get a free Home Mini.
Well, they have a new version of the Daydream as well.
Yeah.
Should we go into that?
No one seems to care very much about it.
No, it has like all new fabric, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine being the product manager for that? Like, really? I get this?
Do you get the impression, and this would be an interesting question to address to Jono, world's biggest VR fan, that VR has kind of stalled again like he did last time? I mean, AR seems to be going places. People talk about it a lot, but full-blown VR?
I think AR is where VR was 2 or 3 years ago, where people are talking about it because it's interesting and it's new, and they can't see any possible, like, real use for it.
I think the real world use for AR is, I would say exponentially more just to annoy Ack, but it's much, much, much more. I would say it's legitimately a full order of magnitude more useful than VR. Just the industrial applications for AR are, and that's people that are willing to spend big money for it, are way beyond what VR could conceivably ever be.
Well, I think what we're talking about is apples and oranges, right? They're two very different things.
Yeah, one's useful and one isn't.
And I think
which
both
one
are
of
useful,
an apple and an orange is useful?
I think they're both useful in different ways. Like the PlayStation, like the PSVR, for example, has sold exceptionally well. Right? There is a huge library of games forming for it. Lots and lots of PlayStation 4 owners have bought them. It's doing very, very well. I think to suggest that that's not successful VR,
it's doing very well for a VR device, not for a general consumer.
Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, we're not. It's not like saying it's doing very well for a car. I mean,
well, no, just for a general consumer electronic device.
But this is
my point
thing.
is that I would say that's the early stages. Like we're still. I would say that like the Oculus Rift and the Vive and all that kind of stuff, that was like phase 0 of VR. Now we're actually starting to get into the product type, like the consumerization of VR. I would say the PlayStation VR headset really is the only real consumer VR device, probably with the exception of the Daydream View.
You're
and
joking.
The Daydream View is a curiosity.
Gear VR, the Samsung one, has sold 5 times as much as PlayStation.
I agree, but I don't consider that as much of a consumer device. I think it's a curiosity.
Which is fine, but then you're not allowed to go, the PSVR has sold loads as an argument, because Gear VR has sold 5 times as much.
What I'm saying is that I think that given the fact that the PSVR has done well in a consumer setting, suggests that there is an appetite for VR. Now, that might be solely limited to games, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it feels like the initial excitement has died off a bit as people have discovered the next cool thing, and it's sort of... I'm worried that it might peak and then drop back down without achieving sustainability, I suppose. I'm not exactly sure what the word is. You can imagine as a thing builds up, eventually it hits a point when even if everyone goes, this isn't cool, it still keeps going because it's part of the world now. VR to me feels this time like it did last time around, which is all, terrible freescape polygon graphics or whatever, or VRML. But it feels like it never achieved sustainability before everyone got bored with it. And it feels slightly like that's happening again. But I'm short of evidence for this.
The problem in my mind with VR, and I think the Daydream View is a good example of this, is I think people feel weird putting those headsets on. They're big, they're bulky, they're uncomfortable. And to be fair, the Daydream View, I've got the first version, I've got the new version in all of its new colours.
All of its new grey colour.
150 shades of grey, in fact. But it's, I just, It's cool, but it's a curiosity. It's interesting, and at $50, that's fine.
When did you last use it?
Probably about 2 weeks ago.
That's more recent than I thought it was going to be. Assuming you're not lying.
I don't want to give over the wrong impression. I use it very infrequently.
Okay.
So, and I use it because it's a curiosity. I use it because it's kind of interesting to check out. And then I use, like, for example, the Netflix app. I'm not going to sit there and watch Netflix with a VR headset on. It's uncomfortable. No matter how comfortable they make it, I want to sit there in a room. I want to be present in the room, not just, yes, you can have a 85-inch TV if you put the VR headset on, but it doesn't work that way. So anyway, yeah. But I would say Daydream View board, not very interesting. But I'm guessing the reason for that is because they don't want to rev the phone specs for Daydream yet.
Yeah.
Because people are still building apps for it. So they can't
the
really
reason I was
update
basically because I'm getting the feeling the bloom's gone off the rose a bit for VR, and you were quite a big proponent. So I thought I'd see if you were excited by this new release, and the answer is not really.
Well, from what I can tell, it's just really no different other than some colours.
I'm not actually sure whether it's a genuinely upgraded spec. I think they've fettled some of the specs a bit, but it doesn't appear to be any kind of big leap, right?
I don't know.
I don't think so, no.
All right, let's move on. Google Pixel Book.
Ooh.
So apparently the Google Pixel Book is the new kind of, Chromebook type thing. It's quite thin. Apparently it's the thinnest and the lightest laptop Google's ever made. It's got 16 gig of RAM. It's got 512 gigabytes of SSD, which if everything's on the web, I can't see why you'd ever need that. And it also comes with something called the Pixel Book Pen, which is a stylus with 60 degrees of angular awareness and 2,000 levels of pressure sensitivity, which I'm glad about, because if it was 1,800 levels of pressure sensitivity, I would never consider it.
Also, when you say it comes with it, you mean it comes with it, assuming you proffer an additional $99 for it, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, no, you buy it separately, don't you? So and so the Pixel Book starts at $1,000.
It also comes with a 24-pack of pickled onion flavored Monster Munch if you buy them at the same time as well.
Just like the guy who tried to buy community.badvoltage.org.
Yes. We got an email. Jeremy, did you see this?
I did. Hilarious.
I have to dig up Jono's response because it was terribly amusing. Carry on talking about the Pixel Book.
I do like that you added 3 boxes of Space Raiders.
So this thing basically, it's kind of like, looks like a laptop where you can bend the screen backwards, like the Surface Book type things. It's basically a Surface Book running Chrome, from what I can tell.
The one interesting thing, I think it looks really nice. It's probably one of the nicest hardware devices they've released yet. But the one thing, and it doesn't seem to be getting a ton of press, and maybe it's just, I think it's cool. Did you see the instant tethering?
Oh, yeah, that is.
I think that's cool. So if you have a Pixel or a Pixel 2, and you have the Pixel Book, and it doesn't have a Wi-Fi or data signal, and your phone has a cell signal, it will automatically connect via hotspot to your phone.
Right.
You see, I like this kind of thing in theory, but it's really siloed. Everyone's desperate to do this thing where, okay, so if you buy a laptop from us and a phone from us, they'll work together. Apple have been doing this for years. Samsung keep trying it.
It turns out when
a
company does something and they really value integration of hardware and software, and they make you buy into their ecosystem completely, and then that company becomes the most valuable company on the planet, other companies try to do that thing.
Other companies such as Amazon.
There is a reason.
And now the second most valuable company on the planet now, Google.
Yeah. I'm not disputing there's not, a financial reason to do it, and it's great for people who are prepared to be invested in the ecosystem. It's the sort of thing where I'd like to see Google go, and here is how other manufacturers can also tell us this, because what we look to do is provide a great user experience for everybody, not just only customers of ours.
Right. I think they're really trying to sell Pixels now, which is, if you look at the Assistant, right, it was Pixel only for a while. They got the bump in sales, and then they released the Assistant. I would assume a lot of these features they're looking for a bump in sales. They want to make the Pixel kind of like the iPhone is the pièce de résistance of the ecosystem, because you always have your phone with you. They want the Pixel to be like that. So I think they're adding a lot of these features now to the Pixel, and slowly will release them to the Android ecosystem in general, would be my guess.
Yeah.
The issue I have with the Pixel Book thing is, I think the hardware looks beautiful, right? It looks really cool. I think the idea that you can have it function as a laptop, but you can also kind of have it as a laptop, as a tablet, but you can also like bend it back so your tablet's kind of, it props itself up. I think is really interesting. The problem I have is Chrome OS is completely uninteresting to me because it feels like a massive compromise. Like if everything you ever do lives in a web browser, then to me that's totally fine. But for example, with me, I want to edit videos, and I want to edit audio, and I might want to play some games. There's a bunch of stuff that falls outside of the browser that, from what I understand, is a way more inferior experience on Chrome OS. Until they bridge that gap, I'm never ever going to buy one of these things. Maybe that's what Fuchsia's all about.
I wouldn't use Chrome OS as my main operating system. I've looked at it a couple of times, right? But it's just, there's too much stuff that it cannot do, and there's too much assumption that you are prepared to use everything on the web, and more importantly, that you've got a good internet connection.
So they've kind of fixed the offline thing, but I think you guys are...
Yeah, they haven't fixed it much.
I think you guys are failing to grasp that you are in the computer-using world, the 1%ers, right?
Yeah,
most people
absolutely.
are consumers, so Chrome OS is not for you, very much by design.
I agree with you, but I would argue that it's not for the general consumer market because no one's buying the damn things.
You're joking. A shitload of people buy Chromebooks.
They've certainly found a pretty good niche in education. They're selling extremely well there.
I agree in education, but Chromebooks have been out for a while. And at least in my day-to-day traveling, going on planes, going into coffee shops, not just in the Bay Area, but outside of the Bay Area as well, no one is using it. Everybody's using either Macs or Windows machines.
I think the problem is traditionally, at least historically, my view of the Chromebook ecosystem has been that there's been the very low-end $200 ones that haven't been particularly useful, and then there's been the $1,600 ones, which then just buy a Mac and get a full OS or buy a Linux laptop. So I think there's not been a lot of good, high-quality $700 consumer-aimed products that maybe would be a success. So until we see that, I don't know that they're going to be mainstream.
For that, you need to go and buy the XPS 13 or something like that, which is about that price point. It's interesting that you've now got basically three competing things. You've got the MacBook that you've always had, you've got the Surface laptop from Windows, and you've got the Pixelbook from Google. They're all very similar. They all look similar. They've all got very similar specs. They're all roughly the same price. The MacBook's a little bit more expensive. They're all roughly the same weight, and they got about the same storage, half a terabyte or a terabyte of storage, so on and so forth. And there's an interesting question about which would you buy if it was just about the hardware. Like, I can't buy any of these things with Linux on them, but perhaps I could install it on all of them. I could install it on a Mac, sort of. I could install it on a Surface laptop, sort of. Don't know about the Pixelbook. I don't know how it's going to work with Crouton and so on and so forth. But there may be that point of going for it for the hardware if you ignore the operating system choice. But for the rest of it, they are clearly the premium laptop to go and buy for your choice of operating system. If you want to use Windows 10, the thing you should go and buy is a Surface laptop. If you want to use Chrome OS, the thing you should go and buy, and you've got a bit of money, you don't want the $200 one, the thing you should buy is a Pixelbook. If you want to use macOS, then the thing you should go and buy is a MacBook. Me, I'm going to buy an HP Spectre because they're gorgeous and they've got copper hinges, but I'm the 1%, as previously mentioned.
No, it's the one thing I would say is I applaud Google getting into this, and I think that at some point they're going to end up, and this maybe again future or something else, I think they're going to end up having a much more full-featured operating system, because the Google must be aware of the fact that I think a lot of people want to do media production and stuff like that.
But what do you think's behind the drive behind Chrome, right? You could, in theory, do stuff like media production in a browser app now.
The browser's getting there now to where
you could, if someone were to sit down and invest in that market, you could build a video production or music production app which runs in the browser and works fine. No one has done so, and perhaps because there isn't necessarily a market for it yet, but that's why Google are pushing it. I can absolutely imagine Google buying some company and essentially porting their software to the web rendering engine, especially with things like WebAssembly and so on now.
Right.
But that's essentially what I'm saying, is that when they solve that problem, it'll be more interesting. I don't really give a shit about whether they do this in a web browser, whether they do it outside of a web browser. All I care is that they can do it.
The point I was making is not that they've solved it, because they haven't. It's that now, and as of relatively recently, it is solvable in a way that it wasn't 3 or 4 years ago. If you'd have said, I want this 3 or 4 years ago, I'm prepared to throw an infinite amount of money at it, you couldn't have done it. Now, you probably could. And the bits that you can't, the bits that you couldn't do are being filled in.
Yes.
As we speak.
So shall we move on to the pièce de résistance of the Google reviews?
The pièce de résistance is just basically a bit poo, isn't it?
Just blue is not one of the colors. It's just black, clearly white, and kind of blue.
Well, and kind of blue is just another one of the 150 shades of grey from what I can tell. So, anyway, Pixel 2 and the
honestly,
Pixel 2
the colour
XL.
thing just made me cross just listening to the names of them.
Every time they said kind of blue, they laughed too, which was... Anyways, go ahead, John.
It's not blue, it's grey. And it's got a turquoise button. It's the same colour as my first car.
Do you think it's supposed to be a deliberate Miles Davis reference?
I don't know what the reference is, so...
No.
Miles
I
Davis, really famous jazz trumpeter, did an album called Kind of Blue.
Metal guy. Not a jazz trumpeter guy.
I'm not expecting you to own any of his albums.
He's more of a just
who
black
Miles Davis was.
Yeah, just...
For God's sake. Yeah,
So
he
anyways,
did a crossover album with Arch Enemy in 1988.
So, anyway, as has been much rumoured for a long time, there's been the usual amount of leaks. Pixel 2 comes in 2 forms. There's the regular one, and then the XL with the previous generation of Pixels. The regular one is 5 inches. The XL is 6 inches, which I'm not sure is extra large. It's a bit large.
You're joking. I think the ordinary
large.
Pixel is bloody XL.
Anyway, let's not go back to the argument that we always have about the size of phone.
Pixel XXXXXXXL. It's
Now,
like getting one of them huge bargain buckets you get from Kentucky Fried Chicken.
The smaller one kind of looks very similar to the regular Pixel. The only difference visually, seemingly, with the bigger one is that the bezel is a little bit smaller. Google, once again, touting one of the major features on, and it seems to me like really the only major feature of the Pixel 2 is the better camera. Once again, they've scored the highest DxO score, which has beaten the iPhone 8.
It's 98 now. I don't know what it's measured against. I mean, like, is it a score out of 100, or could you score 120?
Well, pretty soon it's going to be a score out of the latest Pixel. That's basically going to be the bar, from what I could tell.
You know, and kudos to Google for. I mean, I have to say that the camera quality on the Pixel that I've got, the first Pixel, is exceptional. It's really pretty phenomenal what they've managed to accomplish, and for them to squeeze that even.
Not only is it phenomenal, but it was recognised as being phenomenal. A lot of people, when they talked about the Pixel and said, why is the Pixel good? The answer was, it's the camera. And Google obviously recognised that and went, okay, we don't want to screw that up. We don't want to change that. Everyone likes that about us.
And the thing is, as well, is, at least, again, as a Pixel user, I continue to be wowed at it on a weekly basis. Like, I'll take a picture of something and I'll look at it, holy shit, doesn't that look impressive? And I actually think the integration where it automatically uploads, like the fact that this whole thing about not running out of space on your phone and you've always got these available online, I think is actually quite cool, because pictures are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But it strikes me that the Pixel 2 is just a really uninteresting release. Like, it's a nominal upgrade from what I can tell.
Yeah, it's a Pixel 1.1, right?
There's no headphone jack. That is a change.
It's IP67 finally, so they've got the word on that.
Yeah.
Dust and waterproofing,
A lot of people
isn't it just like a Pixel 1.5?
So I think the Pixel 2 really is very iterative. Like, it looks almost exactly like the Pixel. Aside from removing the headphone jack, a slightly better camera, and it being waterproof, it very, very similar. They lowered the price, I think, a little bit. It starts at $649, goes up to $749. The Pixel 2 XL, though, looks quite a bit different. They beveled the edges. It has that squeezable thing, which HTC released because it is an HTC phone, and now
and that's where,
HTC's really
for those of you who haven't seen it, where if you squeeze the side of the phone, it triggers Assistant. Which sounds to me like it's going
to... This is gimmick to end all gimmicks.
It's a stupid gimmick.
So
I imagine this is going to get triggered all the time when it's in your pocket as well. So
the other thing that I thought was kind of interesting is it's the first phone released that you don't need a SIM for. So if you do Fi, it has an eSIM in there where you can just use the SIM that's in the phone. So I thought that was
really?
Cool.
eSIM's real
First
now?
eSIM, yeah.
Wow.
So
That,
I think that's
my
pretty neat.
dream of a phone with no external ports at all moves one step closer. eSIMs were kind of theoretical before. People talked about them, but I didn't know you could actually get them.
That's the first
But
one. And it's only if you use Fi.
Yeah, but is that because Fi are the only people who happen to do eSIMs at the moment? Could T-Mobile start doing them tomorrow if they wanted to?
Well, I mean,
Or is it
eSIMs
because it's a
obviously work
magic
with T-Mobile
Google
because
phone?
Fi is T-Mobile and Sprint and American Wireless.
Oh, is it?
or
Oh,
whatever,
okay.
but
We'll pick it up.
yeah.
I just picked a random name, right? So could AT&T start doing eSIMs if they wanted to, or is this because it's a special Google phone on a special Google Fiber thing?
That I don't know.
don't know.
I don't know either.
So yeah, it just seems. I think that. I mean, Google have just recently bought the mobile division of HTC, right? So they're clearly heading in a direction where they're going to be building, I'm guessing, pretty super-powered phones moving forward.
But you said that when they bought Motorola and then sold them again. Who's next?
But I would argue that they probably realized that was not. I would argue they must have learned. If they've bought HTC's mobile division, they must have learned from that lesson with Motorola. I mean,
So they're way
I don't
different
believe they'd make
structured
the same
deals, right? They bought Motorola, who had a whole bunch of ancillary products. They, I think, overvalued the patents included with that deal, and I think they underestimated Samsung's response to them buying a handset carrier. With this, they didn't buy HTC; they just really bought the R&D division. So,
right.
This deal is structured so much differently that I think they learned quite a bit.
But it just seems like I actually think what's interesting to me is they, at least around here, a lot of the billboards about this October the 4th event kind of like erred towards the Pixel announcement. And I actually find the rest of the stuff that they talked about way more interesting.
But I think they're turning Pixel into a brand, right? It's the Pixel Buds. It's the Pixel Book. It's a lot of the products have Pixel in the name. So I think they're trying to build Pixel as a brand, not a phone.
I don't necessarily find the things themselves interesting, but the fact that there is that range. They can do a made by Google announcement, and they're talking about home assistants in 3 different kinds, stupid earphones, Daydream, a new phone, a new laptop.
So I think for the first time, you can, with a straight face, say Google is serious about hardware, and they are.
Yeah.
Like before, I think it was a toe dip, where this is they've dove in fully.
Are you now in a position where every piece of hardware you use could now be a Google thing? I mean, you've been able to do that with Apple for a while. I'm not talking about your microwave or anything here, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you had a Pixel Book and a Pixel phone.
And
if you want assistants around your house, you could have a Google Home.
Google Homes. You could have your speakers. Yeah, you got Google Wi-Fi as well.
Yeah.
I actually, and the one thing I would say as well is, from my experience of Google hardware so far, and I need to talk about the Pixel in a second.
I was going to say, you were like earlier, I find it fascinating why Pixel entertains me every day, and I'm assuming what entertains you is opening up another box with another replacement Pixel in it.
The one thing I would say is the user experience of using this hardware, I think, has been fantastic. Given the fact that Google is still relatively early in its lifetime with hardware, I think the Google Home is a phenomenal product, speaking personally. And the Pixel, from a user perspective, has been really good. The thing that's been disappointing about the Pixel is this is my 3rd Pixel that I'm on now. So some of you will have been keeping up with my trials and tribulations here. Jeremy and I should maybe co-write a book about the Moto 360 and the Google Pixel. But I basically bought the Pixel when I bought it the day it came out last year, or the day it was announced. I pre-ordered it. I got it through, and then, to be completely frank with you, I dropped it on the floor and the screen cracked. And
this is not a hardware fault.
I had the case around it, and I sent it off to a company, and they basically replaced. I actually dropped it twice. To be fair. I cracked the screen, but it was just like a crack on the screen. And then I came back from another night of maybe beverage consumption, and then it dropped again, and it had one of those things where like the display went all purpley and liquidy and all screwed up.
Because you dropped it.
And I sent it off for to this place called You Break We Fix or something like that, and they changed the screen, and it's all like they use real kind of Google hardware and all the rest of it. It's not a knockoff. Anyway, I got that back and it was fine, but that was my fault. Obviously, I dropped it. However, I was a little surprised at how, particularly, I can't remember where we were, but Jeremy and I were at a conference somewhere, and people were throwing their phones around, and they were
that
bouncing
Motorola
off the floor.
Yeah.
That was the Droid 2 or something you said it was?
Droid 2 Turbo, I think, yeah.
And it was like, I was amazed how quite brittle it seemed to be, because the actual hardware feels pretty good with the Pixel. Anyway, I went on holiday, and basically my phone got damaged. And from what I can tell, it was primarily from it being on the beach, because I opened up the SIM thing and there was no water damage. I actually fell over on the phone.
Jonathan Bacon, you led me to believe that it was full of hardware faults, not that you just dropped it on the floor and a steamroller and ran over it 4 times.
But the thing is that there was the phone just literally stopped working, and I sent it in.
Because you poured seawater into it.
Well, I did not pour seawater into it. What I did was, I fell on the phone. I'm not going to explain how I fell on the phone, but I was on a beach, but I was not in the water, okay? And there was no water damage inside the phone, so I sent it in, and they sent me a new one, and there was no complaints about, like, usually these kind of, there's fairly extensive checks to make sure people aren't, trying to get new phones out of companies. It they sent me a new one. I got it back. I got my second one back, and then for some reason, when I made phone calls and put the phone on speakerphone, it sounded like a robot. So I had to send that one in. They sent me another one back. And this one so far has been pretty good. But the problem is that, so first of all, Google support is excellent. But some of this is self-inflicted, like the crack in the screen was definitely self-inflicted, but the rest of it really wasn't.
So what you need is Google's machine learning to learn how to make you less clumsy.
Yes, I do.
New phone address to Jono Butterfingers Bacon.
When I reviewed the original Pixel, Jeremy went on a bit of a tirade about why would you buy a phone this expensive that isn't waterproof? And I said, I don't care. I'm never going to get this thing wet. And I didn't seem to get it wet, but apparently it being within vicinity of the sea was a problem with the Pixel. So
I know we're going a little bit long here, but I do have a couple genuine, actual questions for you guys.
Yeah.
So one of the quotes from, I think it was Sundar, but someone high up was, "We're excited by the shift from a mobile-first to an AI-first world. It's not just about applying machine learning in our products, but it's about radically rethinking how computing should work." How do you guys feel about Google being an AI-first company and the ramifications thereof?
I think they're just rebranding what they were doing anyway. They've always done this. I mean, they've gradually over the last few years started to surface more and more of the fact that they are doing it. But Google search has been attempting to cleverly adapt to the sorts of things that people search for in general and that you search for in particular for years.
But the nexus, if you will, of them having integrated hardware and software that you have with you all the time, I think is what changed.
Yeah, but I think what they're doing is they're just rebranding a bunch of stuff they were already planning on doing as AI because it's the cool new buzzword.
It just dawns on me. The original Google algorithms, what they really did was learn from you visiting websites, and they used a tracking pixel. Now they're just putting a pixel in your pocket and tracking you in the real world. Is that why it's called the pixel? That
profound.
Just dawned on me as we're recording.
Profound, nice. But this is what I think if no one had ever done PageRank and we were still using Alta Vista, right, and then Google thought up the idea of identifying whether pages were popular by who pointed at them. By the way, did you know PageRank is called PageRank because it's named after Larry Page?
No.
It's got nothing to do with the fact that it ranks pages.
Really?
Fact.
Does it rank Larry Pages?
I'll put that in right next to my back rub fact.
That goes in my little book of facts, that one. But if you invented PageRank today, I'm absolutely convinced that if you invented PageRank today and said, we're doing this, you'd call it AI. It's not AI.
It's not.
But you'd call it that. Expert systems are not AI either, right? Helping people narrow down their searches is not AI, but everything's being called AI now. So I think they're largely rebranding stuff they were doing anyway as AI because it's a cool new buzzword.
Okay. I think either way, I think they're building really interesting. I think they're building really interesting products, and that are genuinely useful in the world. And I think that's pretty cool. What is your backrub fact?
Oh, Google's original name was not Google. It was Backrub. That was the first name of the product.
Backrub?
Yep. Like when it was at Stanford underneath Larry and Sergey's desk, it was called Backrub.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can't believe they didn't stick with that name.
Yeah, exactly. So then, on the note of them releasing a bunch of interesting products, in your opinion, what are you most surprised that they didn't announce or release? Or nothing. Nothing is a reasonable answer.
Nothing.
There's nothing you were expecting them to release, and
no, I don't think so. Am I missing something massive? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff where they've got fingers in pies and haven't done anything, like self-driving cars and what have you. And I'm assuming, Google Car will drive onto the stage at some point. But as far as I'm aware, if anything, they've.
I guess the wearable thing, they didn't do anything about wearables.
So the lack of more wearables was one for me, and I'm very surprised that they didn't release a home that was more like the the Amazon Show.
The Show. I'm not surprised
because it has the camera. It could have done part of the Clips software in there. That was my one. Show, that was the biggest surprise.
Yeah.
Echoing screen, right? Basically, for people who don't know what it is. I think they haven't released one like that because, like almost everyone else in the market, they're sitting back and going, is this really going to work? We're not convinced this is actually a good thing, this product. Yeah, so I think we'll wait a bit.
I'm not convinced by the screen ones. I think that's going to be built into fridges.
I don't know a single person who's got a show. They may be more popular, A, in the States, B, in California, and C, in Palo Alto.
I don't know a single person with one. Jono, do you know anyone with one?
No one.
So between the three of us,
I've seen very little buzz around those. So
interesting.
Yeah. So I don't think they got into that for that. The wearables thing is interesting because not only did they not announce any Wear stuff, but they've dropped all Android Wear things from the Google Store. It only does Google only products now.
Really?
So is Android Wear dead?
It may not be dead, but it was coughing up blood last night.
So, given the fact that this show is probably longer than the actual Google announcement, and we've probably said machine learning as many times in the show as we had. I'm
calling the show machine learning, by the way. I'm going to make a note of that.
I think we should go. I'm going to make a bold suggestion. I think we should do the outro as part of this segment.
What, in that we should just go, thanks very much, goodbye, and that would be the end?
Yeah, this is going to be the Google Home outro.
Okay, Google, end the show.